Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Just before we get into the first verse, I just wanted to tell you in brief the story. Mahabharata is very complex, very big, but I'll just extract a few parts. The story is about the king who had two kids, two children, two princes, and the name of the princes was Dhritarashtra and Pandu. And obviously, as a in a normal case, who would be the king is the elder of the two. But in this case, the elder of the two, who happens to be Dhritarashtra, is blind. So now there is this whole big question of, can the blind person rule the kingdom? And they said that person who is blind cannot rule the kingdom. So according to the Shastra, the kingdom goes to Pandu, the younger prince. And as the kingdom goes to the younger prince, what is the sentiment of an elder prince? I mean, the younger brother becomes the king. And this is what I was talking about yesterday, that there is this feeling of resentment. That I should have been the king, but I could not be the king because of my blindness. And so there is an unvoiced resentment. He doesn't actually come and say, oh, because of, I'm supposed to be. It's all within, it's all building inside. And it's unexpressed. But Pandu the younger brother, was very sensitive. He saw the fact that, my elder brother is necessarily going to be resentful of the fact that I have become the king in spite of him being the elder. And so what Pandu would do is leave for the forest from time to time and make him the person in charge. So that's a way to kind of, give him the opportunity to have that feeling that, oh, I'm ruling the kingdom, while Pandu is in the forest. Now, Pandu's life itself is something which is interesting, because Pandu had two wives. One was Kunti and the other one was Mandari. And the Pandu, when he was young, this is a story of connections within connections within connections. So that means what happens to your life right now is connected to what happened in the past. So that is how we Indians, we begin to connect things which otherwise are not very apparent, right? So Pandu, when he was young, he had gone for a trip of hunting. And when he went for hunting, he heard the noise near the water body, near the river. And so he thought that it was some prey. And what he did is he released the arrow. And what he realized after he released the arrow is it was not an animal, there was a rishi couple. And while they were together, the arrow pierced through them. And he was devastated, so he came nearby to just see what had happened. And when he came nearby, he saw that a rishi couple was together, and he just kind of killed them both. and And what then happened is, so they were, their prana was leaving, they were not totally dead yet, and he tries to help them, and they told him that, so please don't take it as a curse. This is a kind of a, they said, oh yeah, what is this? Each one is cursing the other. But it's showing the consequences of one's actions. So they told him that we were just being together, we were enjoying each other's company, and we didn't do anything to you, but you actually took our lives, and you have to pay for it. And therefore, if you are together with your wife, that would be the last day of your life.
We're talking about sex, huh?
So yeah. So that means, exactly. So that means that is the curse that Pandu had. So that means that Pandu had 2 wives, but he could really not be together with any one of them. Then the question is, how did he have 5 sons? So there is another story. And the story is that his wife, one of his wife, was Kunti. And Kunti, when there was one sage who was visiting their home, and she served him well, so he gave her a boon, and the boon was that you can just think of any of the devatas and you can have son. You can have a child with just by looking and wishing, you can have a child. So when Kunti received this boon, then she was a young girl and she just wanted to go out and try it out. And what happened is, she looked at the sun, and then came this little child, and the child's name was Karna. And she was so shocked because she was not married and she was a young girl and she didn't know what to do with this son. And she was so ashamed of kind of having him. So what she did is, she was frightened to even talk about it. So what she did is, she went and she dropped him near the river. And then she prayed to the forces and said, please take care of my son, because I'm not able to raise him, I'm not able to keep him. And that Karna then was brought up by the charioteer. And that charioteer happened to be the charioteer of one of the royal kingdom, so the royal family. So therefore, Karna grows up, who's Kunti's son, grows up as somebody who is the charioteer's son. Now, the same thing which was such a, that fact that she could get the son was such a thing that put her in such a difficult position. The same boon happened to be of great use when actually she could not be with Pandu. And that is how 5 princes were born. So Yudhishthira is born with Lord Yama. Kunti thinking about Lord Yama. So that is why he's called Dharmaputra. Then the second one, Bhima, was born with Vayu. Vayu is the Lord of Wind. Then Arjuna was born with Indra, the King of Heaven. Then Nakul and Sahadev were born with the Ashwini twins. So this is how Kunti ended up having 5 kids. Now, what happened is, in one of the stays in the forest, Pandu got attracted to his, not Kunti but the second wife, Madri. So they came together and Pandu died. That was the last day of Pandu. Now, the 5 kids and 2 wives are homeless. I mean, homeless in the sense that they are in the forest and they lost their husband and now they go back to the kingdom. Now, when they go back to the kingdom, the question is, who is the next king? Now, when this question arose, obviously Dhritarashtra, who was blind, was out of the picture. So it came about, the choice had to be made between what the 2 sons, either the sons of, either one of the sons of Dhritarashtra or the son of Pandu. Now, the general rule is that the king's son, the present king's son, becomes what? The next king. Duryodhana, who was the eldest son of Dhritarashtra, had a problem with that. Because he said that I can understand that my father was blind and therefore he could not be the king. But I am not blind and I am the eldest of all the brothers, so I should be the king. And according to Dharma Shastra, what the present son was Pandu and his eldest son, which is Yudhishthira, had to be the king. But Duryodhana said, no way. And already they were in the forest and already Dhritarashtra was running the kingdom and Duryodhana, his eldest son, was kind of, with him. So he did not let go. So they tried to look at the second rule to see how to resolve this issue. And the second rule said, okay, if there is a conflict between the two heirs, right, then the eldest of the two will be the king. Now, so that means between Duryodhana and Yudhishthira, who was elder? And Yudhishthira happened to be elder of the two. So even on the second count, it was Yudhishthira who had to be the king. But Duryodhana said, no way. He said, I'm not going to give up the kingdom. Now, what happened is the people intervened and they told him, he was not willing to let go. So they devised a method where both of them become the king. How? By dividing the place. So the way it was divided, that the kingdom was divided, but it was not divided fairly. Most of the kingdom which was fertile and which was wealthy, it was Duryodhana said, I will keep. And that little region which was totally barren, had nothing in it, and he said, you guys, you 5 guys, you go there and you rule the kingdom. So these 5 boys and 2 mothers, they didn't see any other option. They were weak in their negotiative power, and therefore they ended up going to this little place. Now, as they went, Duryodhana thought, okay, they are just, going to be there, and it is completely, this little region which is not at all fertile. So what are they going to do? But through their hard work, they made it really beautiful, and they made it really prosperous. So now, Duryodhana, even though he has majority of the kingdom, he cannot stand the fact that that little part which he thought was useless is made into something prosperous, fertile, beautiful land. So now he wants that also. And how can he get it? Because he himself has decided to give it to him. So the only way he sees is to eliminate them. So he creates a plot and he builds one beautiful palace, but it is made up of wax, lac. And what he says, he invites them there, and then what he thought is, as soon as they reach there, he will create fire, and they will all be eliminated. Now somebody who is Vidur, who comes to know of this plan. So he warns Pandavas and he tells them, hey, there is a whole big plan that you will be invited there, and once you are there, you will be all blown up. And then the pretension that there was a natural fire. So what they do is, they create an underground tunnel. So they go there. It's all, so now you know how Bollywood happens.
Yeah, true. Much more intended to the Bible.
So then they go there And as soon as they go, then there is something of fire. But these Pandavas, what have they done? They've escaped through the underground tunnel. And so Duryodhana's plan is a flop. So he can't, he sees them all alive. And then he still cannot stop plotting. So he now finds another way to trap them. And the second method is to invite them for game of dice. And Duryodhana has his uncle, maternal uncle, who is Shakuni. And Shakuni has a way to cheat in the game of dice in a way that he always wins. Now Duryodhana invites Yudhishthir to play the game of dice. Yudhishthir follows the rule of the monarchy, and that is, if somebody is inviting you to play the game of dice, you have to honor that person and you have to go there. Now he ends up going, and then what happens is he starts losing, because Shakuni is not playing fair game, he just kind of manipulates the dice. So Yudhishthir starts losing first his kingdom, then everything which is inside it. So then he wants to stop the game and he says, I've lost everything now, so you can take my kingdom, and they wanted to walk out. Duryodhana probes him and says, hey, you still haven't lost everything. What have I got now? I've lost everything. Oh, you still have your brothers. So he starts playing again the game of dice, and he loses all 4 of his brothers. They are gambled and they are lost. Now he wants to again stop, and he says, now I have nothing. They said, no, you're still there. So therefore, one more time, and then he's lost. Then he says, now then they said, oh, you're all our slaves now. 4 or 5 brothers who were prince are now slaves. And then he says, okay, now we are slaves, now I want to stop. No, you still have somebody. Who? Their wife, Draupadi. And Draupadi is also gambled last, and she is also lost. And when she is lost, Duryodhana says, bring her to the court, to the open court. And she is dragged in to the court, and Duryodhana tells his brother Durshasa, that disrobe her. And Draupadi is not a weak woman, she is a strong woman. So she stands up and she kind of first addresses the assembly. In the assembly, seated are all the people, Bhishma, Dronacharya, all of them are there, Dhritarashtra. And she says, how can you let this happen to me? You're sitting there and you're watching me like this, being disrobed. How can you allow that? And all of those people who are considered to be wise people, they keep quiet. Why do they keep quiet? Not because they are afraid, not because they are kind of indifferent to what is happening. They are trying to follow dharma. Look at this complexity of dharma. But they tell themselves, look at their interpretation of dharma. They tell themselves that Yudhishthir had a free will. He could have chosen whether to accept the invitation to play the dice or not. He could have chosen when to stop. And he could have, even if they probe you and they tell you, hey, you just have one more, you can always say, no, I'm not interested. So he decided to gamble away all his 5 brothers, including her. Now, if he has chosen that, then he has to what? Bear the consequences. Who are they to intervene? this was their understanding of dharma. So therefore, each one of them just sat there. When Draupadi came to know that nobody is standing up to protect her, then she took charge. And she used her intellect to see how to get out of this. And she asked a question in the open court. And she asked the question, who did Yudhishthir lose first? Himself or me? And the answer was, Yudhishthir lost himself first. Then she said, if Yudhishthir lost himself first, then he's already a slave. And what right does the slave have to gamble somebody else? He has lost that right. So she used her reason. First was the pleading, then was her reason. But, as I'm so happy Tobias said, woman's voice was not heard, reasoning was not heard. She was shooed away. Even though she had a point, nobody took it seriously. She was dismissed. And therefore, then she had last resort. Krishna. The last resort was Krishna. She prayed to Krishna. As she prayed to Krishna, he also had to make a decision. He did not hesitate for a minute as to what his duty was. What did he do? He did a very ingenious way of what they were disrobing her, and what he did was keep on providing more and more and more and more material. So while they were disrobing her, they never stopped, her sari never ended. And therefore, they finally all collapsed. Just pulling. So therefore, this is something interesting because I just want to tell you, it will be discussed much more in detail later. What I want to say is, Yudhishthir is trying to follow his dharma, which is what? Accepting the invitation of what other king to play the game of dice. The Bhishma and all the people who were waiting in the assembly and witnessing this event, they were also trying to follow dharma. And their interpretation was what? That whenever you make the choices, you have to pay for the consequences. And Lord Krishna was also following dharma. And what was the choice that he made? What was the thinking that was going behind? The thinking that was going behind is, the starting point of this dice game itself was a setup. It was not a fair game between two equals. It was totally manipulated by Shakuni.
And therefore Adamic.
Exactly.
Okay, I see.
And therefore the starting point was adharmic. And once it was adharmic, then the means through which then the whole thing was done, and the fact that it was all manipulated, and then the disadvantaged, whose Draupadi was not heard of, was again adharma. So therefore, what was dharma for Krishna? To what? Not to succumb to that need. So this is where Mahabharata shows the complexity of following dharma. Even to follow dharma is not that easy, because dharma is not just black and white. people who think they are following dharma, they can be misguided. So that means that you have to, the whole of Mahabharata and whole of Bhagavad Gita is to make you that refined human being who's able to interpret dharma in a proper manner. Because we can get so carried away with a very limited, narrowly defined dharma. And we think we are following dharma, but actually looking at the larger picture, we can be misguided. Stories within stories within stories which show that to live a life of dharma, you need to be very intelligent and a discerning person. It's not just black and white, follow rules. Yudhishthir also was misguided. Why? Because he knew very well that Shakuni was going to manipulate. But still he stuck to dharma. What is dharma? The king's duty is to accept the invitation. He could have said, yes, the king's duty is to accept the invitation provided the others play fair game. If others are not going to play fair game, you have no obligation to accept the invitation. That is dharma. So therefore, the whole thing is, many times, especially Indians, they have this feeling that Krishna is always manipulating things. He's not following dharma, he's playing tricks. This is not right. What Mahabharata shows is, others are stuck with their narrow definition of dharma. Krishna shows the larger picture, how to interpret dharma in a proper way. And therefore, he does not hesitate to help her. Now, the question still is that what happens? Okay, she's saved, but what happens to these Pandavas? So, all 5 of them, they've lost everything. So, Duryodhana says, you all go to the forest for 12 years. And the 13th year, you have to be incognito. What is incognito? That you have to stay but not found out by Duryodhana. If they are found out, then again they have to go back to the forest for next 12 years. So now the Pandavas and Draupadi, they go and live in the forest. In those 12 years of living in forest, there are lots of small stories, but it's not really that important. What is important is Draupadi keeps telling them that you guys were not able to protect me. And therefore keeps saying, and then she also kind of sees the fact, and they themselves also see the fact, that it's not going to be that after 12 years, we are going to go and they are going to all embrace us and say, oh, come, now take your kingdom back. So therefore, they were also ready for the fact that Duryodhana was not going to, first, then he will try very hard to find them out during the 13th year. And even if they are not found, he will not give the kingdom back so easily. So therefore, Arjuna is preparing, at the back of his mind, he is preparing for the war. He goes to Indra. How do you know? He goes to Indra and he collects all the amazing weapons. Indra is his own father. So he collects the weapons and all because they knew something is in offing. Something may happen. So they are prepared. Now, 12 years are over and the 13th year starts where they have to be incognito. So they find a neighboring kingdom and 5 of them go to one king and they become his helpers. Yudhishthir becomes the advisor to the king. Then the two, Nakul and Sahadev, one looks after the cows, other looks after the horse. Bhima becomes the cook. And Arjuna is teaching dance and music to the princess. So this way, they spent 1 year, which is the last year in exile, all, well hidden. Now Duryodhana in the meantime is desperately trying to look for these Pandavas so that he can find them out in the 13th year and again send them back for next 12 years. But he's not able to find them. But he hears, he has all these spies all over, and he hears about, that this kingdom of Virat, they have these 5 people who are like quite exceptional. So what he does is, he attacks that kingdom, because he can't just go into the kingdom and look for them. So he attacks that kingdom, and the king of that kingdom has to fight the war. So the Pandavas feel that the king has helped them so much, it is their duty to what? Help the king when he is attacked. So they go with the king to fight the war. As they go, Duryodhana sees them and he says, hey, you are Pandavas. So therefore, now what? He says, now you have to go back to the forest for next 12 years. Then the time is seen when they were found out. And the time was just after the 13th year they were found out. But Duryodhana says, no, it was not after 13th year, it was before. It was before 13th year. So therefore, he insists that they have to again go back to the forest. Now, Pandavas, they can't just keep, this is something which is very important also, right? They continued to yield. They continued to, in India there's a very common phrase, when something difficult happens, oh, let go. And that's exactly what they have been doing, let go. When they first lost their father and Duryodhana wanted most of the kingdom, they let go. When they were tried to be put under fire, they let go. When they were invited to play the game of dice, they let go. When Draupadi was disrobed, they let go. And did that reform Duryodhana? Not at all. That made Duryodhana what? Stronger, greedier, more the kind of self-absorbed, more inconsiderate. So therefore, there was an understanding, this time we cannot let go. Now, if you are not going to let go, what is going to happen? Big war. So therefore, Lord Krishna saw it very clearly. So he said, okay, let me go and negotiate. We can't just let go, let's negotiate. So he went as a negotiator. So he first went and he himself went. He says, everybody said, you go. He said, sure, I'll go. And he told Duryodhana, he said, hey, the time was over. So now please give back, not the whole kingdom, just their little part which belonged to them. Duryodhana said, no, no way. Then he says, okay, if you don't want to give back the whole part, just give back 5 different regions, districts of that small region, and let each one of them have one little district. Duryodhana said, no. Then he says, okay, then give one district with 5 different subdivided regions and give that to them. No. Okay, give one village with 5 houses. No. Give one house with 5 rooms. No. Negotiations failed. He said, Duryodhana said, if you want an ounce of land, fight and take it. The negotiations failed, the war was inevitable. War was declared. When the war was declared, then what each side, they knew that it was going to be a big war. So each one tries to what? Get allies, people who will help, the neighboring regions and all. So they all help, and each one goes and asks for help. As they ask for help, both of them, both Duryodhana and Arjuna, went to Lord Krishna to ask for his help, because he was also the king of what? Dwarika. So when they came, first came Duryodhana and Lord Krishna was sleeping. Duryodhana arrived and he saw Lord Krishna sleeping, so he sat next to him. Arjuna arrived later and Arjuna sat next to his feet. When Lord Krishna woke up, who did he see first? He saw Arjuna first. So he said, both of you have come for help, and I as a king will help you both. But I'll give you a choice. What is the choice? The choice is, on one side, my whole army, all the weapons and everything, and on the other side, me alone, Krishna, non-fighting. I will not fight. I will not have one weapon with me. You choose. But who gets to choose first? Arjuna, because I saw him first. So, what is going on in the mind of Duryodhana and Arjuna? Duryodhana is thinking, and he says, he's laughing inside. He says, what is his choice? Whole of army and all the weapons on one side, and non-fighting Krishna on the other side? So unequal. Then he thinks, oh, I hope Arjuna is this emotional fool who chooses what? Lord Krishna, which is non-fighting, which is useless. And I wish I get the whole army and all the weapons, all sophisticated weapons. So he's saying, I hope he falls into this trap. That is what Duryodhana is. What is going on in Arjuna's mind? Arjuna says, I have all the skills in the world. I have all the power, I have all the weapons, I have everything. But what will make the difference between victory and defeat is grace. If I have Krishna on my side, I have Ishvara or Dharma on my side. So therefore, he chooses non-fighting Krishna. So, both of them go happy. Arjuna gets exactly what he wants. He sees Krishna as the when Krishna is on his side, there is never going to be a defeat. And Duryodhana sees value only in weapons and the human resource, and he gets exactly what he wants. So both of them walk out equally happy, ecstatic that they got what they wanted. Now, now it is the scene of the war. The war, now all the sides are taken, now the war is declared, and this Gita now starts. The Gita starts with the first verse, which is now, it is at the battlefield. And the battlefield is, you think that the dialogue is between Krishna and Arjuna, and it is true, but this dialogue is in the bracket. Actually, it is a dialogue between Dhritarashtra and his charioteer Sanjaya. Dhritarashtra, being blind king, he cannot participate in the war. So he's sitting in his palace, but he's very curious about what is happening. So he asks his charioteer Sanjay, who has been given the capacity to see exactly what is going on in the war, even though he's sitting in the palace with his master, who's Dhritarashtra. So Dhritarashtra is asking Sanjaya, this is the starting verse of Bhagavad Gita. Some of you know how to chant Bhagavad Gita? If you know, just chant with me. If you don't know, relax. Don't feel, oh my God, I doesn't. Okay. Dhritarashtra uvacha dharma kshetre kurukshetre samaveta yuyutsavaha mamakav pandavaschaiva kimakurvata sanjaya. So Dhritarashtra uvacha, Dhritarashtra is asking, who is he asking? Sanjaya. Sanjaya is the last word, right? He says, Dharma kshetre kurukshetre. Kurukshetra is what? The battlefield, right? Now, this battlefield, which is Kurukshetra, he uses an adjective to qualify this battlefield. And what is it? Dharma kshetra. Dharma kshetre kurukshetre. So that means this battlefield where the battle is being fought, and what kind of a battle is being fought? It is dharma. So that means it's not a battle which is fought for power. It is not the battle which is fought for expanding your kingdom. It is fought for dharma. Dharma kshetre kurukshetre. Samaveta yuyutsavaha. So that means people who have gathered to what? Fight. And who are the people who have gathered to fight in this war which is fought for dharma? Mamaka Pandava. My people, Mamaka and Pandava. Pandu's sons. Okay? And what is happening? Kim Kurvata Sanjaya. What are they doing now? Tell me what is happening in the battlefield. In this question of Dhritarashtra itself, his confusion is coming out. How? Because he understands very well that this is not just a war, it is Dharma Kshetra. It's a war which is fought for Dharma. And he understands also which side of Dharma his own sons are. He understands it. Which side of Dharma his own sons are? The right side or wrong side? Adharma side. He understands it, and even though he understands it, why is he not able to intervene?
Because he's blind.
Super. That is blind is metaphoric. Right? So that means he loses perspective. Now, he loses perspective because of two reasons. Two reasons. One is that he himself had resentment. Unexpressed resentment when Pandu became the king. He was not able to voice it. He was not able to talk about it. Now his son is talking about it, and then what? He becomes a passive accomplice. By not saying anything. Sometimes we think not saying anything, we take it as some big kind of a virtue. No, we are being accommodative and we are just being accepting everyone. And that is not. When you have to say things, you have to say things. So that is what he says, that is the one reason. Your own resentment which are not taken care of, you live through somebody else. First reason. The second reason is that mamaka means even if you know that, dharma is very easy to figure out when it is with reference to somebody else, unknown to you. But when they are your own people who are adharmic, then what happens is we tend to overlook. Because our emotions interfere. So that means the way you view the situation is not from the standpoint of dharma, but more from the standpoint of what your connections and your love. So love and the emotions, please understand, it's a very, very important thing. We are not trying to eliminate emotions. We are not trying to be robotic in life, but we are trying to see how the decisions are made. When your emotions are in sync with dharma, wonderful. But at times, your emotions are not in sync with dharma, and often what happens is your emotions take over in decisions. So here the thing is that your love for your own children is a very natural thing. But your love for your children, when it makes you make the decisions which are inappropriate, only then it becomes a problem. So therefore, this very division that he made, Mamaka is his own son, and who were Pandavas? Pandavas were some unknown people. They were his brother's son. And they became what? Outsiders. Mamaka, Pandava. His Mamaka was what? Very narrowly defined. My people were only his son, and everybody else became external. And because of his love for his people, he was willing to be a passive accomplice to the war. But he understands that dharma was not in his side, so he is also very anxious and he wants to know what is happening. So this is the state of mind of Dhritarashtra. In that very question itself, a lot of things are talked about. Now, what is the second verse that I have chosen is I will chant the verse, but I will try to also a little bit fill in between the first and the seventh verse. It says, Karparnya dosho pahatasvabhavaha prujjhami tvam dharma sammuda chetaha yashriyasya nishchitam bruhi tanme shishyasteham shatimam tvam prapannam. This is a beautiful verse, but this is what Arjuna is talking. But before that, I just want to say, now, what Sanjaya has to give an answer to Dhritarashtra's question as to what is happening in the battlefield. So, the way the verses are in between, Sanjaya first tells Dhritarashtra what Duryodhana is doing. And what Duryodhana is doing is, he's going to Dronacharya. Dronacharya is what? Their teacher. In fact, Dronacharya was the teacher of both Kauravas and Pandavas when they were young. He was the teacher. And the teacher happens to be what? Also on the opposite side. That we'll see why. But Duryodhana is going to Dronacharya and telling that, hey, these are all the people against whom we have to fight. Now the question was raised, why did Duryodhana go to Dronacharya and not to Karna? Karna was on their side. Also Bhishma was on their side. Why does he choose to go to Dronacharya? So there is a little bit of analysis, and that says that Duryodhana was totally sure that Karna had he had 100% loyalty of Karna. Why did he have 100% loyalty of Karna? Because Karna, as you saw, was Kunti's son, the abundant son when she was young. But he grew up as charioteer's son because nobody knew the fact that it was Kunti's son. But because he was born of Kunti and Lord's son, he was very, very brave and he was very skillful. But he always got dismissed by Pandavas saying that, oh, you are a charioteer, sir, you are not the prince, so you cannot compete with us. And what Duryodhana did was, he took advantage of that and he made friends with Karna. So Karna, who always felt dismissed by Pandavas, had 100% loyalty to Duryodhana because Duryodhana gave him the value, showed that he was important. So he was 100% sure that he had loyalty of Karna. He also knew that Bhishma, who was their own grandfather, also would give his best in the battle. Why would he give his best in the battle? Because Bhishma, when he was very young, he had taken a vow. What was the vow he took? That whoever is the king of Hastinapura, I am going to protect that king. Again, misinterpretation of values, dharma. Because you can, in fact, what is real dharma is to say, yes, I have taken a vow to protect whoever is the king of Hastinapura, the kingdom. But he did not interpret it correctly and say, provided that king has gained the kingdom righteously. If the king has become the king through wrong means, I have no obligation to protect him. This is what that dharma means. You need to be very clever in understanding what is the nature of the thing and to make the right decision. So he was following dharma in a narrowly defined manner and he went wrong. He ended up on the wrong side. But he was so committed to his vow that he knew, even though he loved his grandchildren over on the other side, he would give his best. But about Dronacharya, who was their teacher, he was not 100% sure. Because as kids, when they were all learning archery from Dronacharya, who was the favorite student of Dronacharya? Arjuna. Arjuna was the favorite student because some of you know the story or you don't know the story. You know the story a little bit? You don't know? Are you following that storyline? Is it, or is it too confusing?
There's a lot going on.
There's a lot going on, that's right.
It's the short version.
Very short version. So Dronacharya, what happened is, Dronacharya, I'm just telling you a few things. You don't have to follow all the connections and everything, but few important things are nice. So when they were all young, they were learning archery, and one time they all had to, the target was a bird on the tree, and they all had to throw the arrow. And Dronacharya asked these little boys, and one of them was, first he asked Duryodhana, then Durshasana, then Yudhishthir. They said, what do you see? And they said, oh, I see the sky, I see the tree, I see the leaves, I see the fruits, I see the bird, I see everything. Right? So each one of them said, I see many things. When it came to Arjuna's time, he said, I only see the black dot in the eye of the bird. That was his focus. And this is why he was excellent. He was par excellence in all his skills. So therefore, being so skillful and so intelligent, obviously Dronacharya had a preference for Arjuna. So his heart was always with Arjuna. How did he end up on the other side? Because of his own son, Ashwatthama. He had love for his own son, Ashwatthama, and Duryodhana had made friends with Ashwatthama, and Ashwatthama pulled his father on his side. So he was not sure whether Duryodhana was not sure whether Dronacharya will give his 100% in the war or not. So very strategically he goes to Dronacharya and says, hey, these are the people with whom we have to fight. And so give your best. Now then comes the turn of the Sanjaya is now shifting and saying what Arjuna is doing. Arjuna, now Sanjaya is explaining to Dhritarashtra, he asks Lord Krishna, who is his chariot, and says, place me at a place where I can see who all I have to fight against. So when he gives that command, what is his state of mind? He just wants to get ready for the war, right? He wants to see with whom he has to fight. Lord Krishna, being the very clever one, he places him in a way that he sees everyone. When he sees everyone, he breaks down. Because Dhritarashtra's mamaka was only those little, he has 100 sons, his 100 sons. Arjuna, on the other hand, says, I only see my people on the other side. His mamaka were what? Much bigger than the mamaka of Dhritarashtra. Dhritarashtra's mamaka was his sons. Everybody else was outside. Arjuna's mamaka was what? Everybody. All his cousins were his own people. His grandfather was his own people. His teacher was his own people. And he breaks down. And this is something which is so important, that whole description of Arjuna when he sees his people and how he describes what was happening to him. He was not trying to behave as though nothing was happening. He describes totally that I'm shaking. He describes in detail that the weapons I'm not able to hold. My mind is going round and round. I'm so overcome by sorrow, I'm not able to think clearly. There is a very vivid description that he's not afraid of showing what was going on with him. He's not trying or pretending to be okay. He's honest. He's honest about his state of mind. This is one of the first conditions of growth. You have to understand what's going on, not be in denial. And not only that, he was actually expressing it, and that is something very healthy. He was telling, but what then? He expressed all these overwhelming emotions and he just kind of, almost broke down. What do you think was answer of Lord Krishna to this state of his? The first few verses of the Gita where the teaching hasn't yet started, Lord Krishna surprisingly was not telling Arjuna, oh Arjuna, I totally understand.
Then I've been fine.
He's saying, hey, you knew it all along. It's not like today you're finding out that you have to fight with your cousins. that you have to fight with your, Dronacharya is on the other side, Bhishma is on the other side. And you did everything, and we did everything we could to avoid the war. I myself went to negotiate, and I was willing to settle for only one house and let go everything else. And therefore, there was no way but to fight. And now that that situation has occurred, you are just like what? Breaking down. And you're not standing up and doing what needs to be done. So he gives him a pep talk. A pep talk is, hey, come on, this is not the time to think about all this, get up and fight. If Arjuna would have just got up and fought, there would not be Gita. So Arjuna further explains. Arjuna further explains, and he says that it's true that I'm feeling like this, but that's not the only reason that I'm not wanting to fight. In that emotional breakdown, he thinks through things even further. And he explains to him that it's not out of just kind of a incapacity, alien situation that he doesn't want to fight. And he gives few more reasons to Lord Krishna why he doesn't want to fight. He tells him that yes, not only my loved ones and my own people are against, but he says, I also see the soldiers, so many other people who have come to fight. And if I were to win the war, I have to what? Destroy not only my people, but everybody else. His vision of things begins first starting, his mamaka itself is much bigger than Duryodhana's. Then he's not only thinking about his people, he's thinking about what? The other kings and what? All the other soldiers who gathered, and their life will go. Then he goes further and he talks about that, okay, if I were to win the war, I'll have to eliminate all these people. Then what kind of society would I rule? What kind of kingdom I would rule? So he's thinking about what? The life after war. The consequences, which is what? Mostly this kingdom will have widows and orphans. And what kind of kingdom I will have? So that means in that emotional state, he's still able to think about consequences of his action, not only to what? His own people, but to other kings and soldiers. And also, after the war, what is going to be the society in which he is going to be ruling the kingdom. And final reason he gives why he doesn't want to fight is, he says, he comes back to himself and he says, through my choice of actions, if I make this choice and create such a confusion in the society, then what would be the consequences coming back to me for making this choice? And he says that I myself will have to pay for it. So, 4 reasons he gives for not fighting. Generally people highlight only the fact that because they were his cousins, that was his first reaction and that is when the emotions were coming out. But even in that state, he analyzes further the consequences of his actions and he looks at the whole big picture. And he tells Lord Krishna that I don't want to fight, not only because I'm a coward, that I cannot handle my emotion, but these are all the consequences. Now, if Arjuna, how does Arjuna's analysis sound to you?
Rational.
It sounds wonderful, right? Yeah. Any thinking human being would think like that. And if this was really the right choice, there would not be Gita. So that means there is something else. And therefore, after analyzing the situation and re-explaining to Lord Krishna why he didn't want to fight, and it wasn't only because of his emotional reaction, but because of all these reasons, what he does is two more things, which is because Gita starts. What are those two things? First, he says, after having analyzed it all, you may think, oh, I've analyzed the problem so well, I'm right. He says, this is how I understand it, but am I confused? Question. Is there any other way of looking at this situation?
So he's asking.
He's asking.
Yeah.
Super. Not only he is extremely careful and very, very intelligent in analyzing the situation, but he sees that there may be another way of looking at the situation. And he's asking. He calls himself Dharma Sammuda Chetaha. Chetaha means my mind. And there it is confused about what is dharma, what I should do. I'm asking you, Pruchami Tvam. I'm asking you, and who am I? I'm the one who's confused about dharma. I may be confused about dharma. I may not be clear. In spite of this amazing analysis, which seems like an analysis which is so complete, he still has a question. A questioning mind. Not, I know it all mind. And the second thing is even more fundamental. He moves from a situational problem to a fundamental problem. And he says, then he goes further and he says, whether I fight the war or I don't fight the war, whether I win the war or don't win the war, I don't see how my sorrow will go. Give me that teaching which will bring me fulfillment. Upanishad. That teaching which gets rid of all the feeling of inadequacies, limitations, lack, which not only does it temporarily but disintegrates and which gives fulfillment. So that means his whole, what started as a situational problem led for him to discover what? The fundamental human problem. Fundamental human problem of inadequacy, limitation, lack, overwhelming feeling with one's emotions, and with problems with self-image, as we saw yesterday. And this is a fundamental human problem. And he was no longer, yes, he was looking for two answers. He was looking for, what should I do now in this situation? Is there any other way of understanding the situation and acting differently? And the second is, what will solve the problem of my grief? So, one is situational problem and the other one is fundamental human problem. And as Shan was saying, none of us have to fight war with our brothers. We don't have to shoot them. We don't have any of that. Why are you learning Gita? Why are you interested in Gita? because we are all interested in solving this fundamental problem. We have situational problems, maybe not of that magnitude, but we do find ourselves in situations where we don't know what to do and what is the right perspective. We do have. But more importantly, for some reason, you are not only interested in solving the situational problem, you are all interested in solving the fundamental human problem. That's why you happen to be here, whether you recognize or not. And that fundamental human problem is something which is across nation. It is across culture. It is across time. That's why this teaching is what we call universal. It is not particular to any culture. It is not particular to any gender. It's not particular to any time. We always try to think, oh, these olden times were really good, right? Now we are in a mess. This is how mind works. But it's not totally true. If you looked at the world just a few years ago, there were world wars fought. Before that, there was slavery. There were all kinds of things. The world will remain what it is. Our mindsets will also remain what it is until we solve the fundamental problem. That search for fulfillment. And that search for fulfillment will only come. You have to search for that fulfillment in its right place. We keep, every human being is searching for fulfillment. There is nobody who's not. The question is when you are searching for it and how. So there is this little, what is the time? 10 minutes. I have 10 minutes, right? So he says that give me that teaching which will give me the fulfillment. So that is what he says. Karpanya dosho pahata svabhavaha pruchhami tvam dharma sammuda chetaha. So, dharma sammuda chetaha is what? I am confused about what is my dharma. That is referring to situational problem. What should I do now? Then the next line says, Yat shreyaha syat nishchitam bruhi tanme. That which will give me shreyas. And what is shreyas? Moksha. So that is referring to what? The fundamental problem. One is situational problem, the other one is fundamental human problem. Problem of smallness and limitation. And for the first time he says, Shishyasteham shadimam vam prapanam. I am your Shishya. So that means the relationship of Krishna and Arjuna. They were what? Cousins, they were friends. Now they have one more role. What is that role? Teacher and student is the role. So now they assume for the time being another role. This is why this teaching only comes to us when we ask for it. And so many of you, I think many and all of us in some way, we look and we look and we look and we go here, we go there, we do things, many different things. Somewhere along this journey, you have to realize, I loved what she said, and she says, I've tried many things, it seems like this is the final thing. Wow. So that means there is something which tells you that everything is fine and it helps you, otherwise you would not be doing it for a while, but there is this whole sense something is missing, something is not complete yet. is a common feeling. And when you ask for it, ask, and this is what I say, include in your prayers. Include in your prayers what Gabby was saying, let me know the truth. So that you don't get what? All sidetracked. Because it's so easy to get sidetracked. Something, anything which is a little extraordinary catches your attention and you get carried away. Because this is how most of the minds are. The teaching comes when you are ready for it. And the teacher also comes when you are ready for it. So therefore, this is what that Shishya is, that when you say, I want to learn and I want to know the truth, things happen in your life. Things move. So this is what he does now. Arjuna is saying, I'm your Shishya and you teach me. And because he does that, then what he, the teaching starts. But before that, he, there is one more verse, which is an interesting verse, and that says, Dahi prapashyami mamapanudhyat yacchokamuchoshanamindriyana avagya bhuma vasapatra murdam rajyam suranam apichadipatyam. This is a very important thing, which is, he further goes on and he says that I don't see how this suffering that I have, shokam indriyana, okay, will go even if, not only if I get this kingdom, but also if I get the kingdom of Sura. What is kingdom of Sura? It means even if I get, I not only, Arjuna, he is a prince. So he is not thinking about going to heaven, he thinks about what? Being the king in the heaven. So he says, hey, I don't see whether I get this kingdom, the shoka will not go. Generally what happens is, when the stakes increase, then what you think is what? That now I'm going to be happy. Here he says, no, even if you give me the kingdom of the heaven to rule, my shoka will not go. What does this verse indicate? This verse is very important because it distinguishes heaven going with moksha. Heaven going is it's also there in our tradition, right? So that means there are some differences which I will talk about a little bit later, but the way we look at heaven is, let me just talk about that, because I don't want to compare it to somebody else's idea because I don't know enough. So the way the heaven is talked about in our tradition is that you go to heaven not because you belong to a given faith, but because of your own actions. So any action that you do which is dharmic or good or appropriate, all that we will see what is good, what is appropriate, what is dharmic. There is a long discussion. But then there is a compensation. And the compensation is twofold. One is called drishta phalam and the other one is called adrishta phalam. What is drishta phalam? Drishta phalam is when I do something good to you, not only you benefit, but what? I feel good. There is something in the universe which gives me the feedback about the nature of my action. That is what we call drishta phalam. But what it says is that action action of reaching out will also lead to somewhat benefit in the future. It's not only this feeling good right now, it will lead to certain benefit. So now, this Adrishta Phalam, you don't know when it will manifest, when it will come out, you don't know. So therefore, this Adrishta Phalam that we are all carrying, if you have done sufficiently good actions, it can either give you better birth next time here, or it can give you birth in some other place called heaven. Now, the thing is, for us, heaven is just one place in the universe. It's not like something, it's like a vacation home. You work really hard and then you go to Hawaii where you have a good time. Why do you have a good time? Because there are nice things, you're surrounded by the sea and the trees and nice resorts and good food and all that. So this is how it is conceived. Now, you go to heaven with what? Your savings that you have. And once the savings are over, then what? You're back. Going to heaven is exactly like that. That you collect some punya, some good, the unseen result of your good actions, which takes you to some pleasurable place. And once, the minute you go to that pleasurable place, then what happens? The first good time you have is what? Your capital is gone. The second good time you have, capital is gone. And ultimately what? Zero balance. And then you're back. So for us, going to heaven is not a permanent solution. It's just like going on a holiday and coming back. So therefore, moksha is not going to heaven. That you need to be clear. Moksha is another pursuit altogether. Going to heaven for us comes under dharma pursuit. It's a reward that you get for following dharma. What is then moksha pursuit? Moksha pursuit is not about you, the little one, traveling to nice places and enjoying goodies. It is knowing your true nature, who's not a traveler in the first place.
So heaven is only for the little jiva.
Exactly. Heaven is within that jiva. It's like jiva, because of one's karma, having a good time. Moksha is of a different nature. Moksha is about removing what? The ignorance of jiva about one's self-identity, which makes the jiva recognize, I am Brahman, I am not this traveling jiva. Different. So Arjuna very clearly says, I am also not interested in heaven. Not only the heaven, I am also not interested in being the king of the heaven. I want Shreyas. Clear. So therefore, moksha is centered on not going somewhere to have a good time. It is about asking, what is my nature? Am I this traveler, that little individual in this world who is constantly going to places and searching for happiness? Or my nature is something different? This is the pursuit of moksha. So therefore, now Lord Krishna has to answer. Arjuna has expressed everything. He has expressed so many things. Why he doesn't want to fight? After having said that, he says, is there anything else that I need to know to assess this situation differently? Then he says, hey, but even if I do whatever I do, I don't see how my sorrow will go. And give me that teaching where my whole, that is addressing the fundamental human problem. And that addressing the fundamental problem, which is moksha, is not same as heaven. All this he explains. This is Arjuna.
So is he saying that the end of sorrow is then moksha?
Yes, the end of the
of
only
learning the
end of
knowledge.
sorrow is moksha. Like we saw in the word of Upanishad, that the word Upanishad itself says that true nature of I, when you know that Upa is something which is near to you, and that well ascertained knowledge about yourself will give you freedom from sorrow.
It means also that at that time, this kind of possibility or this kind of pursuit was very well known somehow, in general terms. See, Arjuna knew that there was something called a pursuit called moksha.
Which was different from heaven.
Which was different from heaven, but he knew. He didn't know exactly what it was about, how to go about, but he knew that there were some teachers, he knew there were some sannyasis, he knew there was one ultimate end that some people are looking for and going after and so on. So it was there in the culture. So what is interesting, if you come back to, for example, India now, there is a vague understanding. They know that there is something called moksha. Every Indian knows. You knew also. Right? But when we interact with some Indian, they think that moksha is heaven going.
Okay.
It's very interesting.
So they
have
lost
Yes.
somehow.
But it's there.
Yeah.
Much more than now if you go to some other countries like France or Germany or whatever.
Yeah.
There is not even that there.
Yeah.
You see, this option or this possibility is not like there in the culture. You have to go to secret places in secret society.
Yeah. Yeah.
You see, it's
Because
very interesting.
the important moment is that you really understand that you are helpless. There's nothing for you to do or to know at all. And in the Western culture, it's really, we don't like to be in that such a position.
No one does.
And even if you're in that position, it's really hard to find a teacher who reached the level of really, because the mind is covered in ignorance. So I can't read myself to moksha. It's not possible.
No, it's not. But that's where we say that if you really are asking the right questions, then somehow the universe will.
Okay, well, it's a strange thing. I mean,
See, the thing is that even though Krishna was always with Arjuna, he never had that question. So that means you have to evolve in some way before that even you are able to take advantage of this teaching. That so many people talked about this teaching resonated that there's somebody who can listen to this teaching and said, oh, this is so unrelated to life. This is like, one person said, this is like Star Wars. Atma is So that means that you have to be ready for it.
And that's what sorrow does.
That's
Makes you ready.
Sorry?
Sorrow makes you ready.
Yeah, exactly. So sorrow is one trigger. Here it was at crisis. Yeah, absolutely.
so the Buddhists, they stop at the idea of getting rid of the sorrow and stay in heaven, let's say. But they don't ask themselves what is the purpose of sorrow and where does desire come from? What is the cause for desire? Well, I mean, I have a desire for something, and that is causing sorrow in the end. But where does it come? Where does it come from? What is the deeper motivation for it? Why do I identify myself with an object? And the problem is not solved by leaving society or living in a cave. It's not solved by it.
So, right, exactly. This is why maybe there is some similarity, but there are some differences, and that's why one has to look at how this whole teaching goes. You're right. And that's why I think what you said is that in the modern way, the way Vedanta is taught, a lot of these things which are actually coming from Buddhist, they get mixed with
Yeah,
here.
yeah.
Actually the teaching is quite different,
Yeah.
and you will discover over a period of time how the authentic teaching is that you will see. And that's why you will see some major differences in how normally Vedanta is taught and how traditional Vedanta is. Where we don't think desire is a problem. So,
Yeah, but I understand Buddha because he was a bit pissed off by the fact that the Brahmins, they were the people who were capable or able to decide what is Dharma, to interpret Dharma, and they misused it.
yeah.
So like it's really difficult to understand Dharma when you have a mind covered in ignorance.
Yes.
So, and then you go to a Brahmin and you have to do a lot of things, pay a lot of money, and then he's telling you what is right and what is wrong. It's not going to work like that. So Buddha was a bit like struggling with that, and that's really a good thing, just to see that you shouldn't be dependent on a person who is himself covered in ignorance. So, but you also need a teacher.
Exactly. That's why you not only have to pray for the teaching, but you also have to pray for a good teacher. Because it's not easy. But the thing is, yeah, you're right. You have to see where the problem is. Just because people who have ignorance, then you reject the book, then that also is a little bit of, you have to be able to distinguish. That, yeah, people you need not follow, but you also reject the book because people don't understand the book, then there is some problem. Anyway, we'll see how the whole teaching proceeds. Now then, when we come back at 5,
Yes.
we'll see what Lord Krishna's answer is. Om Purnamadav Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti.
For not even lunch in a restaurant close by, it's 5 minutes, but please, I suggest